Hey, deserving listeners. So a lot of you, and I mean like Vanderpump Rules, a lot of you are asking me to follow this story of Teresa Johnson is her real name. She goes by Risa Tisa on TikTok, and the viral sensation that she calls it is Who the Fuck Did I Marry? I don't know anything about this story, so I thought I would start off by watching a video of Good Morning America's coverage of this. So let's watch that.
Teresa Johnson's story of falling in love, marrying, and then divorcing a man she says turned out to be a pathological liar has over 400 million views. We're not naming the man involved. We're using the nickname she gave him in the videos, Legion.
Okay, so she married someone with the made-up name of Legion, meaning she doesn't want to name him specifically. Although with 400 million views, I'm guessing somebody figured out who she was talking about, but I don't know. And so she got married, then divorced, and she claims this individual is a pathological liar. Whenever I get a lot of requests, I'm always wondering, what is the twist here? Because why would I be requested to watch this if there's already people covering this story? So I'm guessing there has to be some sort of psychological angle. Is it her? Is it him? Is it a twist? Or is it just a feel-good story about a divorce? Let's watch.
With just one question, she had the internet hooked.
Who did I marry?
In her 50-part TikTok series, Teresa Johnson, now widely known on social media as Risa Tisa, details her world.
This is interesting. I wonder if we're witnessing history. You know, I'm sure as an old person myself, there have been previous TikTok sensations that were similar to this. But in terms of it rising to, I don't know, suburban levels and old people levels like myself, I have never heard of a 50-part, 400 million view story on TikTok.
When pandemic romance that she says was filled with love, heartbreak, and alleged deception.
I'm going to tell the story of how I met, dated, married, and divorced a real pathological liar.
I thought actually I should probably keep notes because that might help. Sometimes I regret not taking notes as I go. I can't help it as a clinician. Data and notes are very, very important.
The viral saga has garnered more than 400 million views and counting. Were you nervous at all about sharing?
Yes, I was nervous, but ultimately I decided if you're going to tell this story, tell the whole story. I also really, truly believe the story will help somebody.
I appreciate her sentiment that she wanted to come public with this and thought it would be a good idea to provide detail. So I appreciate that. Now, I don't know what the story is. Is she the pathological liar? I don't know. Don't spoil it for me.
This was a guy who I really, after having multiple conversations with, felt like, wow, where have you been?
Within 2 weeks, she says the couple decided to quarantine together in her Atlanta home.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So that situates it in time. I wonder if this accelerates. Are we going to hear love bombing, actually? Things moving quickly because someone either is trying to prey on someone, they're trying to manipulate someone consciously, or they have attachment issues that result in them attaching very quickly.
Within 2 weeks, she says the couple decided to quarantine together in her Atlanta home.
Okay, so 2 weeks. They decide to quarantine together, which is moving in together, right? Unless he was going to keep his place. I don't know. That's a pretty big distinction, right? But still notable. But a lot of people were doing that back then. I remember hearing reports on some top podcast. Was it Reply All or This American Life? Seems like a story from one of those two podcasts. And they were talking about how people were in a mad rush to find a partner. Particularly, I think, in New York. I remember hearing the reporting from there that as the lockdown was becoming imminent, people were like, all these people live alone, and they didn't want to be stuck by themselves.
Teresa says Legion told her he had substantial savings from his time playing arena football and quickly took over paying her household bills.
Okay, so a past in arena football. I didn't even know that you could have a lot of money from, I mean, I guess maybe, but as a football fan myself, I have to say I would never think of an arena football player as having a substantial amount of money, but what do I know? So that's what his claim was. And maybe he did. I'm guessing these are the lies that we're hearing about, or at least the alleged lies. And also that he started paying the bill. So right now, where she is at, Teresa, is that she's in love. He seems perfect. He seems responsible. He has savings. He's willing to pay her bills. So, there's a lot of appeal there. And the thing to remember if this goes awry, which it sounds like it does, from the outside, it can feel like, well, why would you involve yourself with someone like that? Well, love is weird. And also, if someone really wants to pull the wool over your eyes and deceive you, then it's really hard to know that they're deceiving you if they're particularly good at lying to you. The trick, though, is that you just slow down in the beginning of a relationship. It's a really good way of seeing if the pudding has proof, if you will, if there's proof in the pudding. And also, it's a way of staving off love bombing. There's nothing wrong with someone really wanting to be with you and loving you and wanting to move quickly in a relationship, if that's how they feel. There is something very, very concerning if you push back on that timeline and say something like, look, I really am into this relationship and you seem like the perfect person for me, but there's no rush here and we can take it slow. And I hope that you won't be hurt by me saying I don't want to move in right now. I definitely, if things continue to go well, if someone isn't love bombing you, then they'll be relatively okay with that. Maybe a little disappointed, but it's not going to cause them to spin out of control or to really put pressure. If someone really loves you, then they'll wait, right? But if they're love bombing, then the pressure really begins.
What were you thinking when he was making all of these promises and when they weren't happening?
We're touring houses. I physically saw him put an offer in on a house.
Okay, I'm guessing this. I'm waiting for when it starts to go south. But if there is a lot of evidence of pathological lying, wow. It's one thing for someone to say, yeah, your car, it's struggling. Like you have a car that needs a lot of repairs. How about I just get you a nice car someday? That kind of talk is different than actually going to homes without the intent of actually buying, but with the intent of conning her. Let's see where this is going, but it kind of sounds like that's where it's headed. That is particular.
Houses. I physically saw him put an offer in on a house.
And then that detail, actually physically, meaning that you sign, I think that's what she's meaning. You can't just verbally say, hey, how about I buy this house? You have to actually commit because the seller has to gather those commitments and determine which of those commitments that they will go with, right? So if this is a con, yeah, wow, that's something.
It is unfathomable to see someone put an offer in and they have no money. So my mind was kind of saying, okay, something isn't right, but you know what you saw.
Okay, so another part of assessment in clinical assessment, whether it's in psychology or in medicine, is to take account of the differential diagnoses, meaning that you have data that seems to be pointing in one direction, and you want to make sure that you're ruling out other conceptualizations that are adjacent, meaning that what she's saying is that he put an offer on a house but didn't have any money. It's possible, the strongest hypothesis at this point, early in the data gathering, is that the individual is a psychopath. That's what I'll say. What the internet will call a narcissist or maybe a sociopath, which is at least somewhat closer to the way psychologists talk. But a psychopath is someone that lacks empathy and lacks impulse control, has chronic criminality, and has no problem lying to you and exploiting you for their own gain, and is very callous and lacks any kind of remorse, and they can be very, very charming. Also, we might consider antisocial personality disorder, which is a broader category that most in my field consider to be broader, and as a subset of antisocial people are psychopaths. Psychopaths are arguably antisocial with additional behavioral characteristics. So that's the main hypothesis that that I'm operating from at this point. The differentials are some sort of thought disorder, delusions, psychosis. You could have someone who actually believes that they do have a lot of money in the bank, or they believe they're about to come, into a lot of money, and so they're making all these kind of assumptions. Sometimes people can be manic with bipolar and believe that they deserve certain leeways that they might not otherwise think. It's sort of like if you were being paid every 2 weeks and you have a very stable job for 10 years, and just like clockwork, just like the sun rising and setting every day, every 2 weeks you get X amount of dollars in your bank account, and it's always on a Friday, and it's Thursday, the day before payday. And you are with your friend, and you are wanting to buy something minimal, like you want to buy, I don't know, a PS5 or something, and you don't have the money, but there's one left, And so you say, hey, could you get me that? I'll definitely get you the money tomorrow. And in a lot of circumstances, if you have a good relationship with your friend, they'd be totally fine with that. And you would feel not 100% entitled to your friend lending you the money for that, but it would be pretty hurtful if they didn't, given just how desperate you were for this thing. I don't know if PS5s are rare. I'm sure they're not anymore, but you know what I'm saying. And if they said no and said, what are you talking? I'm not going to give you, you imagine you might get a little upset. Well, for some folks, when they're going through mania, not every manic episode is like this, but some are. They will have this real optimistic view of the future and a very grandiose vision of their own abilities and what will happen. And so they might become very convinced that they have certain investments or ideas of investments, which is even less likely to actually pan out. And they're like 100 billion% positive that these ideas of investments are going to absolutely pay off. And they just start operating as if that's true, because to them it is. It's on the way for some folks to full-blown psychosis, where they believe they're a golden god, or that the aliens are going to come get them, or the FBI. It's bipolar and schizoaffective and schizophrenia, or for many in our field, is on one spectrum or in one group. Anyway, so we could watch out for that too. And being on the outside of that, if you didn't know that was happening for someone, and you weren't aware of that condition, you might interpret it as pathological lying, even though we wouldn't characterize that in that way in my field. Okay, so just chiming in here, that concludes the free portion of this video. The rest of the video is just going to be for members of the YouTube channel. I want to reward those who become members. By becoming a member, you're becoming an actual part of the machine that makes it so that I can make these videos. I don't know if it makes sense to call it a machine, but that's the word that came to mind. I couldn't do these videos if people didn't become members and patrons, because I would have to be doing regular work, like clients working at the university. And so when people become a member of this YouTube channel, they are literally paying my bills so that I can spend time making videos like this. And it takes a fair amount of time. I have to, figure out all the things and edit everything, and there's a lot of it's not for every hour of making content, I'm sure y'all know this, and I'm not, this isn't a woe is me. I just thought maybe you'd be interested in this detail. For every hour of making content, there's probably an additional 3 to 8 other hours that are required in order to produce the content and post it, and all. Is there's so many other things that have to be done. It's really surprising just how much time is spent on the back end and on the front end outside of making content. And I'm kind of streamlined. Other YouTubers, way more than that. You know, for every hour of video, it's like 100 hours of or more. You know, depending. So it's a lot of time. And y'all know that. I don't know why I'm saying this, but it's all part of why it's helpful, very helpful, when people become members of this channel. And as promised, I want to reward them. So the rest of this video is just for members. Otherwise, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.